So welcome all to our first program. I want to start off with, I have a multiple answer question for you. How many cranberry growers do you think there are in Hamilton? Would that be 0, 5, 10? Anybody, any ideas?
1.
5? 1? Yeah, that's 1. And so we have the distinction tonight of having the only cranberry grower in Hamilton. And so I'm writing an article on cranberries, and so I knew that Fred is involved in not only in Hamilton but in Chemung. So I went to see him and talked about cranberry growers that were in Hamilton. Matter of fact, the Galettas and Calacerdas, Collings Lakes, you know, they were all cranberry growers. My family was cranberry growers. And there, Anthony Malora, there's cranberry growers, just to name a few. But anyway, so I was trying to gather information there, and I went to see Cousin Fred. Cousin Fred, because he's a distant relative of Catherine. And she didn't tell you about that. So anyway, so in my questions for him, that we started talking, or he started talking about history, and I was actually mesmerized with the conversation, and asked him if he would come and speak tonight. And he just has a world of information that about Chemung, but it's the same thing it was go from Hamilton. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker this evening, Fred Miller.
Okay, thank you, Bill. This is not up my alley speaking. I wrote down some notes. It would be a lot easier for me, but we've got a nice crowd here, and I hope you enjoy it. Well, my dad, we had bogs and blueberries, my dad did, in the early 30s. But in the 60s, my uncle had a couple bogs in Hammond, and I bought his, early 60s, and I bought some bogs off of a gentleman named Russell Scudder from Haddonfield. And then I bought bogs. These weren't producing, they were out of production. I put them back. But I bought bogs off of Angelo Lamanna, if anybody knows him. Well, he's gone, of course, but the family's still around. And some off of John Amato. And I wound up with 150 acres in Hammond, and only 50 plus acres picking. The rest of it's in reservoir and woods. And years ago, there were hundreds of acres of cranberries right in Hammond, with along 206 and whatever, and plenty of cranberries. And then Bill's family had some, and then I guess it was, in one time there was about 9,000 acres in New Jersey, cranberries. Now it's about 3,000. So and it was only about 30 growers, I think, in New Jersey. And years ago, if you got 40 barrels the acre, that'd probably be a good crop. But now 400 is possible, and even more with the new varieties. And well, that's enough of that. Now I'll explain a little bit about Indian Mills, and also called Chemung. It was always Indian Mills my whole lifetime, and then when the newer people moved in, they didn't like the sounds of Indian Mills, so they did vote, and now we're Chemung, no more Indian Mills. I still like the Indian Mills. But I'll read this off to you. This kind of explains that Indian reservation. This year will mark the 250th anniversary of the founding of the Brotherton Indian Reservation. Here's a short history of the reservation. The complete history can be found in the books. On August 29th, 1758, the New Jersey commissioners purchased for a reservation tract of land containing 3,044 acres, what was then Evesham Township, now Chemung Township, Burlington County, property known as Edgepilik at the time was purchased from Benjamin Springer for 740 pounds. The assets on the property then were 2 houses and 2 sawmills, 300 apple trees, and 24 acres of good Indian corn. The Reverend John Brainerd was asked to assume the role of minister, superintendent, and guardian of the reservation. He moved to the reservation in November of 1759. Originally, about 200 Indians gathered on the reservation to live under the supervision of John Brainerd. The Reverend was enthusiastic organizer, and soon a log meeting house was built, followed by a school, printing post, blacksmith shop, and a village of several small houses, with even a cemetery. But the problem was not as successful as hoped. Every time adjusting to their lifestyle. By 1796, the reservation sunk in poverty. Indians still living at the other reservation less than 60 in 1801. The state of permission to sell reservation land. He go to the old west, and it was a sale. There was 25 hard land for anywhere from $2 to $5 an acre. And it was busted up into big lots. It's like and my ancestors were rights. My brother was the right young 100-acre lots, and my great he was son of a right, and he fought the New Jersey court and the Indians to pay taxes. He could not pay taxes, but of course he lost it. At the battle of the Indian reservation. And then next, the rednecks organization, they're still there. They had one in the it was like moose or elks or whatever. And my grandfather was the first one signed the charter, and I think I got the charter last year or somebody wanted to look at it. And I have a list of the members from, there was some from Hamilton that came over to join this Red Bands, and one of them was F.A. Lehman from Hamilton. He was a blacksmith. And Antonio De Agostino, the Hamilton farmer, he was the member. Thomas Pinto was a member, and there was Angelo Monzo, William Monzo, Antonio Penza. They were all members of this organization. And that's the charter. basket them. And then I don't know if anyone ever heard of Indian Ann. She was the last Indian that lived in Burlington County. And I'll read a little story here, but she was born in 1804 and died in 1894. But she was a next door neighbor to my grandmother, and I got a little piece of information that my dad wrote, if I can find it. Yeah. I also have this is a piece of legal paper with her mark on it. She couldn't read or write, so it's got her X on there. Anybody couldn't read or write, they just made an X. So that's her X. And this is what my dad wrote about what he knew about Indian Ann. It's okay. First, I will tell you my source of information. My mother was born in 1876, daughter of Samuel and Selena Dowdy. They lived in Dingletown Road, about a third of a mile from Ann's cabin. Ann was rather tall, long black hair, and smoked a pipe. Her cabin was on the edge of a small field. My mother said she heard her say several times that when she died, she wanted to be buried under the large hickory nut tree that was in the middle of the field, and ate many meals with my mother's family. She made baskets round and rectangular. And here's a picture of one of them. That my dad had it, and gave it to my daughter. Excuse me, my sister. That's what she did for a living. She made these baskets and sold them. She sold them in Medford, Vincent Towns. Sometimes she would get the train to Medford, take them to Mount Holly. She also sold them locally. I have one that my grandmother told me, mother, that they put her in when she was first born. They used them like as a cradle for a newborn. And when she was first born, when mother got married, her mother gave it to her. Mother said one time she, her sister, and a small neighbor boy by the name of Atwood Wells were in the yard playing. It was almost dark. They heard someone in the woods calling. Mother ran into the house and told her father. He and Atwood came out and recognized Ann's voice. Grandfather went to the house to get a lantern, and Ann called again, "Mr. Wells, I want to meet you." Little Atwood grabbed his father by the leg and said, "Daddy, don't go. It's a bear, and he said he wants to eat you." He didn't understand it quite right. When they got to Ann, she was on her back and could not get up, determined too much whiskey. She was a drinker also. There's a couple little stories. I remember Dad telling this story. She had two dogs. One dog was named You Know, and the other dog was named I Know. One day a peddler come by and asked the dog's name. She told him, "You know and I know." Peddler remarked, "You know, but I don't know." And this is the rest of the story. Ann was great for going around Indian Mills with an empty basket and going home with it full. My wife's old maid aunt did not speak well of Ann. She described her as a dirty old beggar. She always knew when we killed hogs and came to fill her basket. Ann had a son killed in the Civil War, and got a small pension from the government. My grandfather, not my grandfather, my dad's grandfather, built her house. We got the paperwork about the house. He built the house for her, that broke down several years ago. But I was trying to think, there was another little story.
Clock.
What's that?
The clock.
Yeah. She used to come to my great-grandparents' house every week and they would wind her clock for her. She was afraid of it and not very technical, and they had to wind the clock for her. I think that's the end of her. And I got a little piece here from, I don't know how you've heard of the Carranza Monument and Tabernacle from this Emilio Carranza that was flying. He was a U.S. kind of a goodwill ambassador, and he left New York, and it was in 1928, and headed to Mexico. And on his way, he ran into an electrical storm and crashed there in between Tabernacle and Chatsworth. And they said that Mexican children gathered pennies and whatever, and there's like a 12-foot but pretty nice monument there on Crans Road, still there. Every year the Mexican government, some of the officials come there. My mother used to go. They have a little meeting and whatever for him. And dignitaries from Mexico, politicians from our area, they usually sit there. And I have that piece. Is it there, Bill? I'll read this. This is what my dad wrote years ago. Like I said, my dad wrote this years ago. After the accident, my dad and his brothers took a ride up there where this accident occurred. And I'll read it as he wrote it. He said, a piece of the wing from Carranza's plane crashed in 1928. Also found at this site in a paper bag, 2 silk handkerchiefs, 2 pair of silk socks, 1 ring with Mexican emblem, beautiful diamond. And my grandfather gave it to a detective, Parker, his name was, and they didn't think he was really that scrupulous. And he said he would give it to the family, but my grandfather and whatever always wondered whether he ever did or whether he kept it. It was a beautiful big diamond ring. So, that's keeping it pretty short, as you can see. That's about all I have to say.
You want to talk about the Billy O'Day?
Okay. Down on 206, right across from Adsine Lake, there was a cotton mill there at one time. Bill remembers that, right, Bill?
Yeah.
Maybe some other people too. It was a big building, really big, 3-story, and all masonry, whatever. But it finally burned, and they knocked it down. But there was a foreman there. His name was Billy O'Day. He was an Irishman, I suppose, or something like that. And he walked into the open elevator and fell 2 or 3 stories or whatever and died. So my grandfather knew him, and he went down to their funeral, their wake, and he took, my grandfather went along. This, my great-grandfather knew him, but my grandfather went along as a kid, and they were young, and his father told him, whatever you do, none of you kids go around that house. So of course they had to go around the house. And when they got around to the house, I told Bill this story, and he kind of got a chuckle out of it. When they got to the house, they looked in the window, and then they had Billy O'Day standing in the corner and pouring whiskey in him, and with a pipe in his mouth. So that was a real Irish wake, and that was a true story. But my grandfather saw that. Yeah, but Bill remembers that. I don't have it.
You had told me about when they moved the house by, with divorce.
Yeah, it was a farmhouse. It was on Stokes Road, actually, and it was in wet ground and whatever, and they moved it with one horse, with a ratchet, moved it right up Stokes Road. Of course, it was dirt road, and the people lived right in it while they moved it, but it took them days to move it, but there was no electric lines, no water lines or anything to hook to it, so they could do that, but that's what they followed on up there. I don't have too much more to say. I'll answer any questions.
I have a question.
What's,
I'm curious about the harvesting of the cranberries.
okay,
I just read a book
yeah,
where the families would go for the harvesting and camp out. And I remember hearing that my grandmother used to take her whole family and they would go for the harvest. And I never thought anything about it until I read this story in the book about how families, how long would that take? How long would they stay? And how did that go about?
yeah. Well, that's exactly right. There was a lot of families from Philadelphia who would come out to farms. The entrance of where mine are on Jackson River on 206, Bill knows where it is. There were 3 houses there. Yeah, those people came out with their families and lived there till while cranberry season was on.
Well, how long was that?
Well, they would start picking right about now after Labor Day, and they would pick right on up till they said the kids didn't miss school because they stayed. I got pictures home. Not my own pictures from books. There were children this high that were working in the fields picking cranberries, and they lived right there on the farm.
Now back then, did they pick them like blueberries?
No, well, cranberries are low to the ground. They pick them by hand. I got
Got a scoop?
yeah, I got some. I've got some scoops here, but to begin with.
How big is
Begin with, they hand-picked, that was the first, they picked by hand into these or a peck, that's a peck box. And that's what they picked in and they got paid. But that was hand-picking, and the ladies and children would hand-pick them. And then along came, later on, they started using the scoops. That scoop there is a beautiful old scoop, and that is the oldest one. And this would be a newer scoop, not much different, but metal teeth instead of wooden teeth. This one's got Wharton on it. This was one of Wharton's scoops. I've been told this was a little scoop, maybe a child would use it or whatever. You just put it right down in the vines and pick it up, and that would pick cranberries.
When did Fred go from here to how we do it today? With the,
Boy, yeah. Well, in I'll tell you, in the 50s or early 50s, we still used these scoops. The farmers, that's how they picked them. And it was hard work, and I mean, tell you, that is work. And there was a lot of people from Hamilton were involved with the cranberry work. That's on Middle Road, who was it?
Fenza.
Yeah, and it worked for Bill Haynes. Koyas.
Koya.
They were all involved with them and brought pickers there too. And then they made a mechanical picker. A guy from New Jersey made it called Darlington picker, and that worked. Everybody had them, but they lost about 30% of the berries were left right on the ground. Didn't do a real good job. Some people still use them. If you want fresh cranberries, they've got to be picked dry, we pick them all by water now. That's the way they're picked. Most everybody picks them with water, and they got to be taken care of and froze very soon, or else they'll deteriorate. But if you buy any dry cranberries, they're picked with a dry machine, these Darlington machines.
Where do you sell your berries?
Ocean Spray. Ocean Spray is grower owned. That's not a business. I own a number of shares in it, just like anybody else that sells the Ocean Spray. It's
Our dad used to have a can house in Folsom.
oh yeah,
He canned the steak sauce,
sure.
and we used to work there and take the bad berries out.
Oh, yeah.
And how we used to cut and put the lids on and everything. And then at one time, remember they had that scare with the cranberries?
Yeah,
They
that
went to Washington and fought them, and they won their case.
some of your family went